Welcome to What's What with Heather Harris, the podcast for the fiercely hopeful. Here, we explore the lesser-known innovations, overlooked ideas, and hidden forces quietly shaping our human experience. I'm your host, Heather Harris. Let's find out what's what. There is a mystical edge to today's conversation, but this will be a grounded discussion too, because this topic has ancient roots. The idea of the divine feminine has existed across cultures for thousands of years, from Isis to Shakti, from Sophia to Mary Magdalene. But what does it actually mean today? Is the divine feminine an archetype, a spiritual framework, or a psychological truth? In this episode, I'm joined by Allison McDonald Ace, certified holistic health coach, yoga instructor, and author, for a thoughtful exploration of what goddess energy really is. We talk about the divine feminine as an archetypal force, something Carl Jung might describe as part of the collective unconscious. But we also talk about it within the context of lived experience. Think intuition, creativity, cyclical wisdom, receptivity, and relational depth. Today, we are witnessing the product of a culture that overvalues control and speed, conquest and capital gain beyond the values of relational intelligence, embodiment, and care. And we're seeing this in many countries around the world. The energy of the divine feminine is sidelined when we prioritize linear progress, dominance, and control. So what might it look like if the feminine and masculine were not in competition, but in conscious balance? Studies in leadership and group dynamics have consistently found that the most effective leaders exhibit both agentic qualities, things like confidence and decisiveness, and communal qualities, empathy, collaboration, and relational awareness. So in other words, strength and care are not opposites. They're complementary. And maybe that is the quiet invitation of the divine feminine. Can we balance power and control with accountability, care, and compassion? Can we restore our equilibrium? This is a conversation that is both spiritual and practical, ancient and urgently contemporary. Let's begin. Hi, Allison. Thank you so much for being here with me.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me. It's truly my honor. I'm so thrilled to have this conversation today with you, really.
Yeah, I'm excited to have this conversation too. I've been really looking forward to it. I think what we really need to start with is a definition of a kind of the divine feminine. So let me ask you this. This might be a little challenging, but in 3 words, how would you describe or define the divine feminine?
I can't define it in 3 words, but what I can say is it's the missing piece.
Okay.
It's the missing link for what we need as a human family right now in the world. And then I can give you a longer definition.
All right, let's get into it. Give me the drawn out big picture.
So for my framework, and this may or may not resonate with everybody, and that's completely fine. I think it starts with the understanding that we are more than a body. So however you want to relate to that, whether you are a soul, whether we are some kind of higher wisdom that is beyond just the physical form that we see, it begins there. And then, so let's go with energy, just for the sake of the conversation, because for those, I don't want to exclude anybody for whom that maybe doesn't resonate yet. But if we are an energy beyond just this physical body, there is a oneness to that energy, but then there are energy that make up the oneness. And the divine feminine is one stream, the divine masculine is the other. So the divine feminine, if you even want to look at it through the lens of something that would be familiar to most people, like the yin yang symbol, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the feminine is one half and it has certain qualities to it. So divine feminine energy is all about receptivity. It's about creativity. It's about intuition. It's about the body as sacred, as part of nature. It's about attuning with nature, right? And so the divine feminine really offers the counterbalance to the qualities of the masculine or divine masculine, which is all about action and containing the space for that creativity of the feminine. And so both are needed in order to create balance and harmony within the self and then within the world at large. And so the reason I say it's the missing piece is, especially in our culture. I mean, we live, here in Canada, but let's just say in North America, what you really have seen over the last hundreds of years, really, if not more, is the suppression of the qualities of the energy of divine feminine.
Mm-hmm.
And so we are expected as human beings to constantly be doing, to constantly be producing. Our worth is tied to our job, how much money we make, our perceived success metric that doesn't have anything to do with our divinity and our inherent worthiness just by being here.
Yeah, that's a very good explanation. I think I understand the attributes of, can we call it an archetype of the divine feminine? And
Sure. And I mean, within the stream of the divine feminine, you have many different traditions who identify archetypes. So there's, goddess spirituality, there's earth based feminine spirituality, there's even Jungian psychology. Marion Woodman identified these different archetypes, right? So the three main ones would be maiden, mother, crone, or I don't love that imagery because I think it has a negative connotation, but it speaks to when you're past motherhood phase, being an elder who can hold wisdom, right? And so the divine feminine is an archetypal energy that is sort of an overarching umbrella, explains the different phases of feminine energies embodiment.
mm-hmm.
Over the course of a human's life.
Right. Okay. So was there a single moment in your life that you felt called to explore the divine feminine, or was it sort of a slow awakening?
It was both, really. And this is where it's going to get woo-woo.
Okay.
All I can do is share my truth and my experience, and this is how it unfolded for me. But there is context to it. So if you're okay with it, I'll kind of walk you through how this real initiation into the energy of divine feminine happened for me, and then kind of go back to the beginning to see what I think, upon reflecting, set me up for it. During COVID, I actually had an okay time in COVID. I kind of, again, perhaps going back to this idea of being allowed to rest and not having to go, be, do, all of these things to all people in all situations, And so because of that, my meditation practice really evolved because I had more time in the mornings. My kids didn't have to be rushed off to school. Nobody was being rushed off anywhere, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we were all stuck inside. And so prior to that point, I had consistently meditated, but it was more so through guided meditation. And at the same time, I've always been somebody who connects with writing. I am a writer. I am an author, but just even in a personal sense, journaling and that sort of thing. And it's a method I even teach because I find it to be really helpful to connect inward, right, to your higher wisdom. And so during that time around 2021, my meditation practice had evolved to sit in, quiet contemplation and just wait to see what would come through. I would ask a lot of the time, what do I need to know today? Just a simple question to my higher self, higher wisdom, to the divine, whoever. I didn't even have a clear idea at that point. Mm-hmm. It was just this idea of connecting to something beyond my reality that only existed in my body and what was in front of me, right?
Right.
And so it was right before the winter solstice one day when I was sitting at my kitchen table and there was beautiful snow everywhere. And I looked up, I just happened to look up on the patio doors and I saw this formation that had happened to crystallize together on the patio glass. And this instant internal message came through that this was a symbol of Isis. Now you have to understand, at this point, I have no connection to Isis. I don't know who she is really beyond vaguely understanding her as some Egyptian goddess, queen, something. Like I really had no idea. And so what do you do with that? What do you mean? What is a symbol of Isis? Like I have no idea what this is. And then as I was sitting in my meditation and started writing, I was guided through, again, whatever you want to frame it as that makes sense for you. But for me, it was just like an automatic connection through my writing. And it was a message from the goddess Isis, basically saying, you have been called. And if you should connect with this and accept this, because of course we all have free will and choice, then you will work with me and I will guide you into connecting with and learning about, and I'm paraphrasing right now because it was a few years ago, but learning about and bringing forward the energy of the divine feminine.
Wow.
And so that really, obviously, especially when this is all happening internally, there's obviously the question of, am I nuts? Like, am I going crazy? Like, what do you mean? Who is this? But I also, and this is where the practice of the tradition of the divine feminine in different lineages comes true, where when you know something internally to be true, and it feels in every cell of your body to be true, then you go with that and you follow it. And so I did. And I started trying to find podcasts, actually, for whatever reason. Again, that's where I was guided. That's where I was pulled, that spoke about her. Mm-hmm. And then that led me to find certain podcasters who had psychic mediums and channelers who were channeling messages from her. And that unfolded and really just like blew my world, my internal world, my spiritual practice wide open. And from there, I was led to really deepen my practice, to connect to higher wisdom that wanted to come down through me, through my writing. So from there, it was an unfoldment, which I can sort of walk you through next. But I think what's important to say, to provide context, is that I think we're all intuitive, right? All human beings have this capacity, but I think some of us come in at different stages of conscious awareness and conscious awakening, right?
Right.
And even if you're completely not conscious, you can have these big moments that really initiate you and bring you into higher awareness. Some people have near-death experiences. There's all kinds of ways in which the divine works through us and our souls work through us, or energy works through us to bring us into alignment with what we need to know in order to fulfill our purpose here.
Right. Yeah. It's really like a pivotal moment of self-discovery, isn't it? It launched, as you say, a progression of exploration and seeking and self-education.
Yes, it was, but I had been prepared for that in some ways when I look back on my life from the beginning. So I had a very close relationship with my mother's mother, my granny. And when she died, she was like a second mother to me. And she died when I was 11. And I was devastated.
Yeah.
But what also happened is that we were so connected that in the days and weeks after she passed, I really felt her energy in my room at night when I was going to sleep, but it scared the daylights out of me. I was petrified. And my mom, in order to cope with my grandmother's death at that time, had started her own spiritual journey, which she was sharing with me because we were close.
Yeah.
And so she said to me, if this is too much for you, what you can do is ask for that energy to be toned down or for her to connect with you in a different way.
Yeah.
So I did, because even one night, I felt like a hand across my face. I was completely petrified. And in the next few days after I did that, I was playing with a doll that my grandmother had left for me as a way of just like a little token. And I'm feeling inside the doll, I feel like paper. And I pull out this piece of paper, and it's a message that my granny had written to me before she died for me to find.
Oh my, I just got a chill.
Yeah. And it was just it was like, it could bring me to tears now, even though I'm 42 years old.
Yeah.
But it was, first of all, it was my first initiation into the understanding that there is something beyond the physical body, right? And that you can stay connected through the soul, through energy beyond the physical body. And it was just a message of, this doll reminds me of you. I loved you then. I love you now. And it was so incredible, but I was so intuitive, and it scared me so much that I shut that part of me down for a very long time. I was always still getting little hits, and I would, I would meditate or listen to nice music and lay with my eyes closed, even as like a teenager. And I was open to the understanding of it all, but my personal intuitive connection, it just freaked me out so much.
Yeah.
But then cut to, I had my first child, my son, James. And when in 2017, I became pregnant with my second child, baby girl, and she died for no reason in utero at 5 months. And it was a shocking, harrowing experience. But as I sit here now today, what I realize is it was also an initiation that blew me open again.
How so?
Everything that I had shut down about my connection to the worlds beyond and the energy that can't be seen. I was given a choice. I was on a walk one day, and I was just devastated, of course. How do you make sense of something like that in a human mind? And I had, again, just like this intuitive hit come through that said, you can either be broken by this or broken open.
Okay.
And I said, okay, I choose to be broken open. And so that set me on a path of connecting to love, to the idea of the soul, the spirit, and really helped me to remember that it's through acts of service to each other where we feel the most joy, right? And so I use that experience to help others. And so I share that only to say, I think that those two prior pivotal experiences set me up on a path so that I was open to whatever was going to come through in my life. And I trusted enough that if it was coming through, that, not to completely question it and to follow the thread, because I knew through those experiences already that there was something going on beyond just the physical realm.
Right. And as you say, there was a deep-seated knowing. It was in every cell of your body. You didn't have to question these two quite powerful experiences. Wow. So what did connection to the divine feminine look like for you at the beginning? Because it was probably a journey, as all explorations are, right? We start quite novice and then we become more acclimated, more knowledgeable, more wise. What were the first small signs that you were moving in the right direction?
Well, it really was a journey and an unfoldment and a following of a thread or a following of the breadcrumbs that I received through my meditation practice, through my intuition, and through my curiosity, and just, it's one of those things that that this was set up in such a way that, call it fate, call it the divine plan, that you were meant to discover this way, because I was discovering things and teachings and authors that I've never heard of these people. I've never connected in any way to any of these teachings. There are a few key resources and teachers along the way. It's a book called The Sophia Code by Kaya Ra.
Okay.
And that was the first book that helped me to understand who all of these goddess energies are. And so the goddess energies of Isis, Mary Magdalene, Kuan Yin, again, they were all unfamiliar to me. And this book sort of walked you through their, outside of religion, outside of anything to do with that, what their energy was and what that represented. And so that was my first way of connecting with and understanding, okay, this isn't about these figures and the religious traditions that they're associated with. It's about understanding that if everything is energy and the divine feminine is one aspect of that initial oneness, that source energy, well, there's different ways in which we can connect with that.
Right.
Right. And so for me, the way that I began to connect with that and practice that was understanding the different aspects. So going back to the idea of archetypes, or just ways that it can manifest or be embodied, right? So the divine feminine is love and compassion, absolutely. But it's also fierce. The divine feminine energy is the same energy that you would connect with if I said to you, a mother did some inhuman act of running faster than she's ever run before because she sees her child is about to get hit by a car. There's a ferocity and a protectiveness of it. And then there's a wisdom, an embodied wisdom that has nothing to do with what you would learn in a textbook.
Right.
But it's about trusting your own intuition, your own internal guidance system, your own discernment, and following that unapologetically. So for me, what it looked like is that I would start reading these. So the Sophia Code was the first resource that I really connected with, and I highly recommend. And that led me to the work of Megan Watterson, who she's actually blowing up right now and getting a lot of media attention. But her book was the first one that she wrote. It's called Mary Magdalene Revealed.
Oh, I think I've seen that. I haven't read it, but I think that's crossed my path.
I highly recommend it. It was pivotal in my understanding of this aspect of divine feminine tradition and energy. And again, it has nothing to do with religion. Like, I had no connection to Mary Magdalene. I grew up as an Anglican, going to church on Christmas and Easter, but I'm not religious in any way. However, you can't deny the way in which all of this is coming to the forefront now. Again, 20 years ago, who said divine feminine?
It wasn't even a phrase as far as I'm aware. Yeah.
And maybe it was in small underground schools.
Yeah.
But I'd never heard the term.
No. Even though it's quite an ancient energy, as you say, it's quite an ancient concept too, that is embedded in contemporary cultures as well as cultures that existed millennia ago.
Exactly. And so that particular book is what helped me to understand this. She's just an embodied representation of this energy that was suppressed, that was completely twisted, that was denied in all of us in order to give way to a patriarchal society that worked on control, that worked on suppression of the real power that comes with embodying the divine feminine energy. She's just one representation. So connect with whoever you want, right? You can go with anybody that speaks to you, Goddess Bridget, Goddess Isis, it's however you come to it. It's more about the understanding that within all of us, there is this balance of energy that has been suppressed and is missing. And it's the thing that's making us all so tired and so sick.
Yes. And it's not limited to women either.
No.
I think there will be a lot of people who tap into this episode and think, oh, this isn't for me because I identify as a male. But it's a human, integral aspect of our nature.
Exactly. And that's the thing. It's, for example, we live in such a way that we are not taught as young children. And I think that's changing. But the way I grew up, I wasn't taught to align with the cycles of nature, for example. So whether it's summer, fall, winter, spring, we're hustling, we're doing the same thing, except for the break that you got from school in summer.
Right.
If you're an adult, you don't get that break. You're just expected to constantly be working, constantly be producing. And if you say, I need a day, not because I'm sick, not because I have an appointment of some nature, I need a day to just rest because I'm feeling depleted, that would be considered
laziness. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so that's just one simple way of understanding this energy that is here and available now and is coming to the fore now, with works like Megan Watterson's work and Rebecca Campbell. She's a wonderful author and mystic, and she writes books, and she has oracle decks, which you can really use to help connect with this. It really is about rebalancing ourselves so that we have that intuitive understanding of when to act and when to rest, when to be creative, as in receiving the idea of creativity, and then when to push that out into the world. And I think the reason everything is so wonky is because there's just an entire emphasis on those masculine qualities of do, and not enough just be.
Just be. And I agree with you. I think we are hearing that message more, that rest, even from the medical community, rest is very valuable. It's in fact integral to our well-being and our mental health. But it also goes beyond that. I mean, it is fundamental to the human experience. And in fact, it does have a seasonal calendar. Yes. Humans always did rest after the harvest and, yes, wait before the spring. So do you think there's value in paying more attention to those seasonal cycles?
I think it's one way in which you can 100% reject that hustle culture and come back to what your cells know to be true, which is, especially if you are a woman in a woman's body or identify as a woman, this is an energy that you are uniquely designed to attune to, because as if you are a woman with a womb and you have a regular period, that's one way in which you can understand that you're a cyclical being. And this used to be honored. And then beyond that, however you identify as a human being, we are nature. And so when we reject that connection and we expect to always feel the same year round, to do the same year round, you are setting yourself up to feel in some ways like a failure, or in other ways, again, like I said, to be sick, either sick just because you overwork yourself and you're depleted and your nervous system is depleted, or perhaps sick in your mind in that you are anxious all the time, or you're depressed and you don't know why. And I'm not speaking about anything that has an actual clinical diagnosis, but more so that feeling of depression where you're like, I just don't feel good. And then you realize perhaps it's because I've been working constantly for the last 10 years, trying to achieve some arbitrary measure of success. And my spirit, my intuition has been calling to me to slow down and pick up painting. And I'm not doing that. I'm not giving myself that time because it's not being valued.
Yeah.
In our society, so I think that it aligning with the cycles of nature, it's just one way to come back into balance. I mean, think about in the summertime, we naturally have more energy. Why? Because there's more sun, because we can be outside and we can be warm, right? And so in the wintertime, I think the fallacy is that we're supposed to be doing and acting in the same way, and we're just simply not.
All I want to do is put my pajamas on and read a book and have a cup of tea in the wintertime. That is my go-to. That's what I want to do. I mean, as you said, this society it's go, go, go. It's hustle. It is you are failing if you're not 2 steps ahead. So to find that balance, to integrate rest or creative pursuit, you have to be very effortful. You have to really carve out that time. And that's that's difficult because you are going against the grain, and I don't think yet we're at that place where it's valued.
You're right. It's hard. Like, I'll just call it what it is. It's hard. It's radical.
Yeah.
I'm among my friends. I'm not the norm.
Yeah.
I'm the woo-woo lady who's, taking an Epsom salts bath with meditation music on because that is what I need that day. Whereas all of my friends are pushing through their exhaustion or their own, whatever their spirit is calling for them to do, because they feel guilty.
Yeah.
To do that, so it is hard. And at the same time, as I said at the beginning, it's the missing piece.
Mm-hmm.
And if that connects with you, this idea of bringing back into balance these feminine energy qualities within yourself so that they can spread out into the world. If that connects with you, you can think about it, if you need to get around it, to get around that hustle culture mind. It's an act of radical service. If not for yourself, but think about if you have children,
mm-hmm.
they're watching you all of the time. They see how you live your life. But even beyond that, if you don't have children, what about if it's an act of service for generations to come, where we're the ones here right now at the vanguard who are saying, actually, no, this is not how we were meant to live. We are not meant to live out of alignment. We're not meant to live out of balance. We're meant to live in such a way that honors the body, that honors the heart or the intuition that comes through the heart, and yes, the mind. And in order to create that as a reality in our world, the thing that we can do is, in small ways, live it.
Actually live it.
Just live it. Embody it. And the more people who say, I'm going to choose to, let's just even choose something other than rest, but that, it's just such an easy example to come to, but I'm going to choose to follow my intuition, even though it might not make logical sense right now.
Yeah.
So that doesn't require carving out time for a bath or for a walk. That's one way in which you're choosing to remember that you have been gifted with an innate navigation system that has nothing to do with your thinking mind. And that it's when you come into that heart space and come into that intuition, that is connecting with divine feminine energy. That is balancing things out, because you're saying, yes, I probably should become an accountant because I'm really good at that. And that it's a good living and all of these things. But there's just something calling in me to open a flower shop. And so many people don't listen to that intuitive heart pull because it doesn't make logical sense.
Yeah.
But what if that's the thing that would light you up, and in lighting you up, you light up everybody around you and you bring beauty and connection to nature in the world. And then because you're doing that, you eventually have the most successful flower shop on the strip.
Yeah.
And there's your money.
Yeah.
And so for me, it really is about this energy of divine feminine as a counterbalance to the masculine qualities. There's medicine in that.
Yes, well put. There's medicine in that, because there are real consequences to, if we're going to stick with the intuition, to not following your intuition. How many times have we seen people follow a path they think is society's valued path to follow? I will be a doctor. I will be a lawyer. I don't have passion for it, but I know it'll make my parents happy. It'll look good on my business card and it will look good in my bank account. And then these people are miserable and either hopefully have the wherewithal to connect at that time and then follow their path, or sadly, they remain miserable. They remain overwhelmed. They remain disconnected from their truth.
Exactly. And, I consider it my mission, my purpose, my honor to be a representation of that radical trust and that radical faith in self. But again, I don't want to minimize the fact that it is hard to do that in our current culture.
Yeah,
it
really is.
And at the same time, being in integrity with your own inner self and knowing that you've never betrayed yourself to something that didn't actually feel right and good to you. There's a lot of value and self-esteem that comes from that.
Mm-hmm.
So it is tricky, and yet the world is changing. The world is awakening and opening up so much that we can have a conversation like this. 100 years ago, probably we'd be burned at the stake for being witches, or maybe 200 years ago.
Yeah.
We couldn't have a conversation like this. So again, just sort of touching on what I was saying about Megan Watterson's book, what that reminded me of is that this is happening in the collective, this reawakening to this idea of connecting with our innate divine feminine qualities. This is coming up now without any one person driving it. And so there's something to be said when all of a sudden people from different walks of life who are being guided to read these books or guided to do these different practices that they've never done before. Well, what is that? What that is that energy of the divine feminine, of the divine mother, that's saying, okay, now is the time. And it's like sparking in all of these different beings in different ways. It's landing with the people that it needs to land with in order for it to be brought back to balance.
Yeah, and I think that's it. I think maybe the reason why we are seeing these conversations about the divine feminine and there is a reawakening, if you want to put it that way, perhaps it's in response to the vast imbalance we are seeing right now in the world when, you mentioned some of the characteristics of the divine masculine, which are all valuable in and of their own right. But when imbalanced, and we're living in a world where we are clearly seeing the evidence of that, it's authoritarianism and it's oppression and it's force and a show of strength and hyper capitalism. That is evidence that those characteristics, those attributes of that divine masculine or those masculine traits things have shifted off kilter, and there's not enough of the care and the compassion and the intuition, receptivity to counter it. If we could, in an ideal world, see that balance, what do you think would change in our leadership systems, even in our homes, in our relationships?
I mean, I just think it's almost impossible to imagine, I think. And at the same time, I know it's coming. And so you just hold the energy for that. And I think the way that looks is you don't have, for example, people walking around with the mother wound. I can share a story where I know of a man who was raised by a mother who very much lived her life in fear. And she loved him as a child, of course, as all mothers do. And yet she was so in fear of him not being perceived as hyper masculine, hyper successful, being that sort of archaic definition of what a man is, that she really destroyed his sense of safety and of self love, self sovereignty, and his sense of place in the world. So it's not just about how it would change in terms of, we're allowed to, everything would be more peaceful, or it's not such a hustle culture, right? But I think what ends up happening is that we are allowed to be who we are intended to be in all of our unique aspects without intense judgment or shame or scrutiny. And when you grow up being supported by your family, by your society, to be authentically who you are, who you came down here to be in your unique way, there is so much less pain of living. And then there's so much less of that imbalance that leads to aggression, that leads to generational trauma of wounding each other over and over and over again in this never-ending cycle. I think that that's really what you would start to see is if you want to just take it in the context of family before going out into the bigger world, it's that we're all honored and respected for exactly how we came in and the unique ways in which we speak, we look, we're drawn to certain activities, and that's honored and supported, as opposed to, as we were saying, the aspect of a job. Oh, well, you can't do that because that's not going to be considered manly enough or feminine enough or successful enough, and then when we all get to be our own authentic selves, I mean, the lack of wounding alone, I think, would change the entire way that humanity shows up in the world today.
Yeah, it would have a ripple effect. Yeah, listening to you speak there, it's really removing that urge or even sometimes necessity to conform within the society you live. And so in a perfect world of balance, there would be some less resistance and more peace.
Yes, and I think you would be given permission, not that you need it, but let's say you would have the space held for you to come back to the realization that you are the ultimate authority on you.
Oh, my goodness. Yes.
Right? And nobody outside of you can tell you who you are or who you're meant to be, or that you are wrong by being this way that you feel called, just because it's not how I envisioned the way it would go for you.
And that is the experience of so many, certainly of women historically, being slotted into gender roles and having autonomy over our own bodies and how we live. And still, it's a struggle in many areas of the world. Something to dream about. So tell me, what aspect of this work has surprised you the most over your professional career?
The thing that continues to surprise me is really how, because this is something that I connect with and practice and live with on a daily basis. And let me be clear, I am in no way perfect at it. I catch myself coming out of balance or feeling pulled quite a bit into that old way of being, let's call it, not the new paradigm that I believe we're all moving towards. But what surprises me is how disconnected, especially I work primarily with women in my practice. And, the majority of my friends are women, but, I have men friends and I have sons. But I guess the way that my work has unfolded thus far is that I work primarily with women. And I'm just so surprised all the time by how they cannot get out of that mentality of guilt if they take time for themselves. That self-care is it's a would be nice.
Yeah, a luxury. Yeah.
It's that the meaning of their worth and their life is defined by their job.
Yeah.
And so that is the thing that surprises me, is how still this sort of way of being, or this energy is still in its early stages in some ways for a lot of people, where they're only a little bit allowing themselves to dabble in what that would look like for them if they were to come into that balance.
I would imagine that you are probably sometimes the first person to introduce the idea that there is a different way of living.
This is it. And again, I do think that it's my honor and my part of my purpose in being here in this life at this time is to live it so that I can hold that model, if you will, for those who will come after, and for those in my circle who notice it. And if all it does is spark that little bit of openness or curiosity or awakening to, maybe I could be doing this thing called life a little bit differently, then that is, as I said, it's my honor. And I do believe, being, again, one of my guided meditation sessions, my intuitive meditation sessions, I was shown this image of me on a bridge. And, symbolically speaking, and I was just holding a lantern. And I think, if I remember correctly, that day I was meditating on, well, what is the point of all of this? What am I doing here with this work, with all these, beings that are coming through? Okay, follow me, go look up me, divine feminine, everything. What is the point of all of this? And I was shown this image and said, you will be a way shower. And you are on halfway on the bridge. And so the work and the way in which this works through me, and I'm a vessel and a holder of that, I believe, is to make it as accessible as possible. As I said, I'm in the middle of the bridge. So I'm not all the way on the other side where I'm speaking and I'm, so esoterically trained that I'm speaking to people who have been awake for a really long time. I think the way in which I convey this messaging and this work in my yoga sessions and my writing workshops, and just in the way I interact with people, is to make it not, as much as I can, not woo-woo and not inaccessible. This is not something that's out there only for people who, dance around in circles with flowers in their hair chanting. No, this is for every person, because it's just our inherent truth.
Right. So if there was a woman listening, or a man listening, or non-binary, a person listening, who wanted to explore, obviously I will put links to the books that you've mentioned in the show notes, but on their own, And perhaps you can reflect on how you first started out. Is there a practice that you think immediately can help encourage that connection to the divine feminine within oneself?
Yes. I think that the easiest, the most accessible, free way that you can start practicing bringing that into balance with yourself, with oneself, is to make a vow, a commitment to follow your intuition.
Mm-hmm.
And what that looks like is, let's say you were to say, I'm going to do that for a week or a month as my meditation, as my personal growth practice, whatever works for you. What you can do is you can incorporate it with a walk.
Okay.
Right? And so you say, okay, this is my intuition practice where I'm not following my head, I'm following my heart. I'm following that inner voice that speaks not in the thought loop realm, but through my heart, through my inner knowingness. Go for a walk and follow your intuition. And you'll be surprised how much you start to realize that you're so trained to do everything with your thinking mind that your heart will say, go right at this corner. And everything in your mind is going to say, go left, go left, go left, go left, go left. And then you go right because this is your intuition practice. And you'll be so surprised. Something like so incredible will happen, or so small, but so incredible. Like you'll bump into a person that you had thought about 3 days ago that you haven't seen in a while. Or you'll happen to see this one particular bird that you haven't seen because it's winter, and all of a sudden this bird pops out of nowhere. And when you start to follow your intuition with discernment in your life, that's where all the threads start connecting, you know? So the practice is first to connect with your intuition, because for most people, they just don't operate with that navigation system being at the forefront.
Yeah, it may not even be switched on for some people because they've ignored it most of their lives. So for you, Allison, what does that feel like? Really, in a practical and real sense, what does that intuition sound like to you?
It sounds like my voice.
Okay.
Speaking to me. It is that inner voice.
Yeah.
But it has a different energetic quality.
Okay.
It's just a deep, calm, do this, go here. It's that nurturing, knowing wisdom, as opposed to the other inner voice, which sounds like perhaps panic or fear, or if you don't, or ego, if you don't do this, then you're not going to, you know?
Yeah.
So it's still that inner voice, but I think, again, and this is where the practice comes down to, yes, the intuition, but also the body. It lands in the body in a way that feels good and calm. Eventually, I think at first, if you're not used to it, it can feel disconcerting, but it starts to, as you develop that connection to your intuition more, you start to realize the difference of when something is intuitively guided. There's just that deep knowingness that even if this doesn't make logical sense, I know and I trust myself.
Mm-hmm. There must be an aspect to it of making space in your mind for intuition to come through. Because if I think about my own mind, often I have my headphones on or AirPods in, listening to podcasts, learning, or I'm planning, I'm thinking ahead, I'm filling in the gaps with tasks or errands or things that I think somehow are going to put me forward in whatever my real life goals are. And so there's so much busyness up there, that it's very hard for that to come through. So it is a practice. And maybe at the beginning, it will feel uncomfortable or just foreign. But as all practices, you have to just put it on repeat.
Yeah, you start somewhere that feels, and this is the thing is I hesitate to prescribe anything because as in this is the way, because we are just inundated with, whether it's, if you don't eat 100,000 grams of protein, you're not going to be a healthy person. Just like all of these prescriptions for how to do and how to be that don't respect the person's bio-individual needs and also inner knowing and self-sovereignty. And we're all different. So
absolutely.
What I want to say is, for me, the way it looked is I sat in meditation and I asked, a lot of the times I would just put my hand on my heart and I would remember that the highest wisdom that can be found is in the heart, is in that space of that connection to something beyond the physical form. And I would ask, what do I need to know? That worked for me. And again, even some of the guidance that came through was just follow your intuition, And so that is what worked for me. And I think meditation has so many benefits. If you can start just by sitting, getting quiet, lighting a candle, putting your hand over your heart and saying, what do I need to know? And asking for your higher wisdom to come through.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But for some people, that doesn't work. And so I think that really just setting the intention of reconnecting with a part of you that knows beyond the thinking mind in whatever way you can. So as you were saying, you're constantly busy and on the go, and that's just real for so many of us. But perhaps you could go for a walk, as I mentioned, and call that this today is my meditation practice, my intuition practice, and just go for a walk without a podcast.
Mm-hmm. That would be radical for me.
It is, right? And I get it. It really is. But that's one way, or as I said, you can just take a bath and listen in and say, what do I need to know? You can practice it when you're making food, whether for yourself, for others, for your family. You can say, what is the meal that I'm intuitively being called to make, as opposed to what my brain is telling me I should make because that's what's quote unquote healthy, or that's got the right amount of protein, or whatever it is. There are so many different ways that I encourage people to practice their intuition and practice their inner knowingness and their connection to their divine self, because there is no one right way for everybody. But I think connecting to your intuition and developing a stronger, quicker knowingness with that piece of yourself is only going to serve your highest good.
Yeah.
You're never going to go wrong with connecting to the energy that lives within your heart, that lives within the space of love, that can be used in conjunction with, I said, like your discernment with your mind. It's not about, okay, we don't have a brain and we don't think. No, it's what is my true self, my highest self calling for me to know? And then how can I, again, connecting that, if you want to call that the divine feminine, and then connecting that with the divine masculine energy of discernment and action. Well, how do I bring those two together so that I'm taking action, or I'm taking inaction in a way that's in alignment with the highest good for me and everybody?
And in the most balance. So what are you still learning about this work now, or what are you hoping to learn about the divine feminine now from this point in your journey?
So I seem to have hit in my personal life, and this happens, oh my God, I mean, my whole life is just always, I have to learn it first.
Mm.
And I really have to learn it through experience, through direct experience, before I can speak about it or teach it
Right.
outside of myself. And so I seem to have hit a little bit of a point in my personal life where I'm having to remember, really remember. And so it's actually so interesting that we're having this conversation now, because it's come at a point where I'm like, oh, right. I've kind of been pulled, and who knows? Is it the energy of what's going on in the world? Is it winter? Is it perimenopause? Like whatever it is. I've noticed that I've been kind of pulled back a little bit, pulled off kilter. And so on the one hand, I'm having to remember and refocus on my own balance with these qualities of the feminine, and really just coming back into my heart space is where I'm being called to reconnect with all of that for myself. But beyond that, what seems to be emerging for me now is, okay, so we understand, for those of us who are interested in this and have awakened to this, we understand now that the divine feminine, the qualities of the divine feminine are coming up, they're reemerging because they need to. They've been suppressed for thousands of years. This is necessary. But as I said, I'm a mom of 2 boys. What seems to start pulling at me now is, okay, so let's say that gets integrated and established. What about then the divine masculine? Because that is obviously the next frontier, if you will, of collective healing and balancing. And so I think the way that it is emerging for me in my own personal meditation and study is, once we get the divine feminine more firmly back and anchored into this world on an energetic level and in an embodied way, then we must turn our attention to healing the divine masculine and bringing that into balance. And then from there, you get the oneness that, they speak about in yogic philosophy and all sorts of traditions. The idea is, when we're balanced within each other, then we become whole. And so that seems to be where I'm being called to continue my own personal exploration of all of this material.
And would you define your personal exploration and the awakening to these energies collectively as a hopeful practice or as a hopeful trajectory into our future?
Absolutely. I think, again, like I said, there are so many platforms and people speaking about this, doing this work in various forms, whether it's overtly in more of those spiritual spaces, or whether they're just doing that work. I think what's coming to mind is Scott Galloway. Do you know him?
Yep.
Yeah. So he's an example that I think of where he's really holding that energy of, he's a man in a man's body, but he very much honors the innate divine feminine as well. He's a good example that to me is coming to mind of, this is what we need more of, and that is what is emerging more of in the world, so that we can have these conversations. And there are so many people, and there continue to be more people doing the work, either on big platforms or just individually in their own lives, and holding that energy and that space for their own future generations. So for me, it's not a question of whether this is going to turn around for us as a human family. It's that this is the path we're on. And if you are curious about this, if you've been called to this in any way, whether it's to have a conversation or to do more work in the space of the spiritual realms or whatever it is, follow that, because you really are then awakening to the truth of why you have come here, at least in one aspect of your purpose. And you're doing it then for all of us, And so I think the fact that more people are coming to this is so hopeful. And it's beyond hope. I believe really that it's already written. We're just in that transitional phase of where we were, the caterpillar, and then there's the cocoon. I think we're in that really icky, gooey, breaking down phase of the cocoon.
Feels like that, Allison. It feels icky and gooey, I have to say.
I really think that is where, and it's dark.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
But then there will be an emergence on the other side. And we're all so lucky that we get to be here at this time, even though it doesn't feel like that a lot of days for a lot of reasons, for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
I do think that we are living through a time that is so pivotal.
Yeah. A time of great change. Well, I thank you for that, because that's a very positive message to share, that it's beyond hope. It's actually, the light is coming. The light is coming. Okay. Well, I have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation with you. I will, I think, embark on my own journey of exploration, and I hope that many of my listeners do, and seek more of the divine feminine in their own lives. So if they wish to reach out to you, follow you, read your writings, what's the best way our listeners can do that?
The best way to connect with me at this moment is my website, AllisonMcDonaldAce.com. You can sign up to my monthly newsletter, where I delve into all of this in an experiential way, meaning I just talk about my own life and what I'm struggling with and what I'm working through and what I'm learning, because that seems to be, as I said, the way in which I am being called to relay all of this. Is just, I'm just a regular lady.